Chapter 4, Ethics in Social Research. Okay. I can't help but say okay. uh, there we go. All right. Ethical issues may arise from a variety of factors. Research problem itself, such as genetic engineering and determinants of intelligence, that can be a problem. Setting in which the research takes place. If it takes place in hospitals, prisons, public schools. Procedures required by the research design, participant exposure to conditions that may have negative effects on them, method of data collection, covert participant observation sometimes is not complete, kinds of people serving as subjects, the poor or children, types of data collected, personal information, of course. So why research ethics? Once upon a time, there was research done by the U.S. Department of Health. This is in 1935. They called it the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. What they did, they wanted to find out what would happen if they left individuals untreated for syphilis, people that had come down with syphilis and then they just didn't treat them. They recruited participants from the rural South who were primarily uneducated and they were black. The study lasted until 1972, though penicillin was invented to treat the disease in 1945. They didn't treat these individuals. Sometimes they give them shots, but there was nothing in there. They didn't have any penicillin. During the 40 years, participants were neither informed about nor offered penicillin. An investigatory panel determined that the Department of HEW, Health and Education and Welfare, had failed to acquire informed consent from the participants and never offered the participants penicillin. It was one of the great embarrassments of government research. They used these individuals, and they didn't give them an opportunity to be helped. And there's a picture from the Tuskegee. He's drawing blood from that select individual. Obedience to authority study. Stanley Milgram conducted a study to test how long people would obey orders. The ethical criticisms included participants were under a false impression that they were harming another individual. The participants were allowed to suffer stress, which led to panic attacks, breakdowns, and even seizures. The study produced no outcome that benefited the participants. As the results became known, the participants potentially felt guilt about the lethality of the electric shock. The experiment could possibly undermine the participants' trust in authority. This is what Stanley Milgram did. He recruited a bunch of individuals to come in to do educational research. And he told them that what they were doing was doing educational research where they were using electricity to accelerate education. So what they did, they attached an electrode to one of the participants, and the other participant was supposed to shock this individual if they got a question wrong. And lo and behold, of course, they got it wrong almost every time. And when they did, of course, then they were supposed to shock this individual. But as they were going along, they were supposed to increase the level of the shock. And so they thought that they were really hurting this individual. The reality was, of course, he was a Confederate. He wasn't being electrocuted at all. And they were trying to find out how long these people would keep doing what they were told to do. And the answer was about 2/3 of the time. They shocked them right up to the end. Males, it happened with males. They did the experiment with females. And they got exactly the same result. About 65% of the individuals shocked them. Were willing to shock right up to the point of lethality. And there's a picture of the Milgram experiment, very famous experiment. Recent cases of falsified data. Dutch psychologist Diederik Stapel fabricated data used in some 30 published research articles. Harvard biology professor and primate researcher Mark Hauser investigated for falsifying data and misreporting his results on the sound recognition patterns of monkeys. In early 2020, Surgisphere, the makers of hydrochloroquine, falsified their research data promoting the anti-malarial drug as a cure for COVID-19. Unfortunately, the information got out, not that they had falsified their information, but that they had a potential cure for COVID-19, and it was pushed by President Trump. He had already touted it as a miracle cure. Even after it came out that they had falsified their research, he still pushed it as if it were a miracle cure. He wanted something to get people's minds off of the fact that COVID-19 was so dangerous. Research that employs some degree of deception as part of an experiment has become commonplace because it offers methodological, practical advantages. Researchers sometimes collect data without the knowledge of the observed individuals, and some investigators are not always scrupulous about guarding the confidentiality of survey data. Social scientists face a conflict between two rights: the right of the scientist to conduct research and contribute to knowledge, and the right of individual research participants to self-determination, privacy, and dignity. This conflict is the essence of the ethical dilemma of social science research, and this is a problem. This can be a really serious problem because during World War II, the Germans, the Nazis in Germany, did some unethical research using human subjects. Of course, these were in the death camps, and they were going to exterminate all these people, and so they did all kinds of horrible research. And because of that, and the Japanese did the same thing in China. So we need to think about ethics. We really need to think about ethics. And just because it may benefit somebody, if it doesn't benefit somebody else, if it hurts somebody, then it's probably unethical and it shouldn't happen. Research involving human participants should be performed with the informed consent of the participants. According to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, researchers are required to obtain signed consent forms from study participants who are to be placed at risk. The guidelines of the participants should know that their involvement is voluntary at all times. They can quit anytime they want, and they should receive a thorough explanation of the benefits, rights, risks, and dangers involved in their participation in the research project beforehand. Reasons for informed consent derives from both cultural values and legal considerations. It is rooted in the high value we attach to freedom and self-determination. Regulations and laws have been enacted in order to guarantee that individual freedom has been preserved. Informed consent shifts part of the responsibility to the participants for any negative effects they may experience in the course of the study, and simultaneously reduces the legal liability of the researcher. Clarifying the intent of informed consent, it involves 4 elements: competence, voluntarism, full information, and comprehension. Competence refers to the understanding that any decision made by a responsible, mature individual who has been given the relevant information will be the correct decision. Voluntarism, a social scientist who complies with the principle of informed consent, ensures that the freedom of participants to choose whether or not to take part in a research project and guarantees that exposure to known risks is undertaken voluntarily. The Nuremberg Code delineates the researcher's responsibility to explain the research prior to voluntary consent. This means that the person involved should have the legal capacity to give consent. And this is And the reason they call it the Nuremberg Code is because it came out after World War II. They were conducting trials on war crimes against the German government and against German individuals in Nuremberg, Germany, and that's where the Nuremberg Code came out. They looked at some of the research that the Nazis had done during World War II, looking at the research being done at the death camps, and they realized this is grotesquely unethical. They had one doctor who was doing medical research. His name was Mengele. He was doing medical research. And he was taking twins that were to be executed, and he was taking them out of the gas chambers, and he was doing experiments on one and the other. So one would go through he was using one as a control. Since they were twins, they were genetically identical, and he was experimenting on one and allowing the other one to not be experimented on. And eventually, of course, he executed both of them. He allowed them both to be killed. But of course, this was horrible. They did these horrible experiments where they froze people to see if they could bring them back to life. They would inject them with different diseases to find out what the effect was. And of course, they had the one that wasn't being injected and the one that was being injected. And of course, they could see the difference between the two. Just horrible stuff was going on during World War II. Full information to be fully ethically acceptable. Consent must be both voluntary and informed. But fully informed consent is impossible, so federal guidelines have adopted the strategy of reasonably informed consent. Fair explanation of the procedures to be followed and their purposes. Description of the attendant discomforts and risks reasonably to be expected. Description of the benefits reasonably to be expected. Disclosure of appropriate alternative procedures that might be advantageous to the participant. Offer to answer any inquiries concerning the procedure. And instruction that the person is free to withdraw consent and to discontinue participation in the project at any time without prejudicing the status of the participant. Comprehension refers to the confidence that the participant has provided knowing consent when the research procedure is associated with complex or subtle risks. How to ensure complete comprehension: use highly educated participants, provide a consultant to discuss the study with the participants, provide a time lag between the request for participation and the actual study. Sorry, needed a drink. Informed consent is not always a necessity. Informed consent is not a universal requirement for all social science research. Although desirable, informed consent is not an absolute necessity in studies where no danger or risk is involved. Invasion of privacy is a big concern, especially in the era of the cloud. The issue is becoming more sensitive. Protection of privacy is becoming increasingly problematic. 3 different dimensions of privacy have been identified: sensitivity of information, setting in which observations are made, and dissemination of the information. I was talking to an individual that does security, and he said he was talking about the cloud, and he was telling me, well, anytime you do anything on your cell phone, an Android or an iPhone, it goes automatically to the cloud. And a lot of people didn't understand this. And this is one of the reasons why all these celebrities have had their accounts hacked, and people are finding nude sexting pictures online because they're on the cloud. Everything's on the cloud, and if people can hack into your account, then potentially they can download those. All that stuff is up there. We're talking about the cloud as if it's actually there. It's just an information database. um, and people are able to get to hack into it, and that's why we've seen all of these strange nude photos of celebrities because they're sexting their partner, their boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Sensitivity to information refers to how personal or potentially threatening the information is that the researcher wishes to collect. The APA has said religious preference, sexual practices, income, racial prejudices, and other personal attributes such as intelligence, honesty, and courage are more sensitive items than name, rank, and serial number. The setting of a research project may vary from very private to completely public. A particular setting, being public or private, may not be self-evident and may lead to ethical concerns. Dissemination of information concerns the ability to match personal information with the identity of the research participants. Fictionalizing the names of participants does not always protect privacy if other details are available. Anonymity is provided by separating the identity of individuals from the information they give. Anonymity can be accomplished by not asking for participants' names. Researchers can also safeguard their data by introducing passwords and monitoring their information to improve privacy. Confidentiality is the ideal, but not always easy to do. In order to permit outsiders access to data without compromising confidentiality, researchers have developed these techniques. Deletion of identifiers, names, social security numbers, and addresses. Crude report categories, release county instead of neighborhood, year of birth but not other date, profession but not specializations. Microaggregation, constructing average persons from data rather than specific data. Error inoculation, introducing errors into the identifying data while leaving the aggregate data unchanged. Regulatory mechanisms, legal statutes, institutional review boards, IRBs at research universities and institutions, professional codes of ethics, personal ethics of the individual researcher are all important. IRBs serve two major functions. They ensure subjects are not placed at undue risk. They ensure subjects are not coerced and elect to participate in research studies by giving their informed consent. There are various codes of ethics in the social sciences. Ethical codes are written to cover specific issues scientists encounter during the research within a particular field. Codes explain what is required and what is forbidden, as well as sensitize researchers to their obligations and best ethical practices. And that is the end of our lecture.